Like, what did you see that spurred you to get into this?
Yeah.
What's the opportunity out there, right? Like for go-to-market teams and data.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is like they're like psychologically go-to-market teams are really interesting because there's no dependability in business like you would say towards the top mid funnel-ish, right? The further down the funnel you get like traditional like AE related kind of sales processes, the more dependable your business ends up becoming. So the psychology of the go-to-market teams here, and I'm talking about like revenue operations, marketing operations, like CMOs, heads of growth, etc. That middle group has the most amount of unfiltered data to play with and experiment with, and are actually generally much more accepting of this idea of like, I'm going to try some things to see if it might work or impact my business. So psychologically, that group is a really interesting group that sits on top of data. The kind of data that they sit on top of, that in itself hasn't changed as much, right? You're either advertising, sitting on top of advertising data, CRM data. I think teams are getting better and better about pulling these sources together as well. I see more and more companies that invest in data lakes or like composable CDPs and stuff. So I see that team already is thinks about the opportunity in data is like pretty big. But then the problem that I see them facing is, and then we as humans like solved around that by like creating new functions, was around one, like in order to extract any value out of my data, like I need to get the data in a shape, which means like that's where some functions like marketing ops functions, revenue operations functions were created. It's like, can you keep your system of record in the right shape that if I wanted to extract something out of it, I was able to do so. Um, and then the other side of problem that they were facing was like, what is the thing that I can extract out of that data? What are the questions that I can ask? And inherently, what happened was both of these processes became biased. The first process became biased because you start looking at new tools and you already are anxious and sweating because you're like, what? I have to connect my data to this, so I don't even know how long it's going to take for me to actually get any value out of these tools. The second part that started creating bias was when you are the one who's asking a data question, you're biasing it, right? It's like based, you'll get an answer that's based on the question that you're asking,
Mhm.
but the questions that I'm asking are only as smart as me. They're not beyond that. Your business is not one person, your business is multiple people.
Mhm.
So while everyone got kind of anchored to certain metrics like CAC, LTV, these sorts of like marketing metrics, um, they forgot that there is like a meta goal, which is like, I want my business to get better. So you end up in a world where even though they can get some insights out of their data, they end up optimizing for these like minor metrics along the way. Sometimes at the expense of your macro goal. So both of these processes to me ended up becoming biased enough that I felt like there was an opportunity to kind of bring those two pieces together into a more cohesive, but then also like a living system that evaluates, that adjusts like as your data is like adjusting around you. Um, on the first side of it, which is like getting the data in the right shape, etc., that is always something that should be taken care of by like a neutral party, right? Because you don't want to have perception at that level be
Mhm.
applied to it. You can have perception business logic applied at the semantic level, which is the layer that sits on top of like your raw data. But at the layer where you're collecting data, collating it, getting it in the right shape, there shouldn't be any kind of subjectivity. So that's one part of it. And then the second part that we tried to solve, that I tried to solve with Amoeba, was on the letting the data talk to you instead of you asking the data questions. So you're no longer in the position where you're like biasing your go-to-market motions. And the advantage for us in go-to-market teams, especially, is you're able to experiment really fast. So you're able to kind of prove out whether instinctually you were in the right direction or not, like really, really fast, right? In some cases, those cycles are as short as like 7 days. So I think that the combination of these things is why we basically ended up picking go-to-market teams. You could see impact really fast. It was a problem that they were readily facing, and we felt like we could solve it.